I just want to touch on being a writer and an author. The craft itself is not for the faint of heart, but it's like a trend I've noticed over the years, and it's people tend to be creating shorter works and then considering themselves authors. And while I can't control what other people do, and I certainly wouldn't want to take away their achievements. For me personally, I couldn't produce something that I don't think is substantial and worthy of being published. We've all been there when you start a project, it gets tough, it gets grueling, and you think, well, I can't go any further. I can't do more. So you stop. You stop for a moment, but some people just completely stop, and then they say their work's finished. So you get these books that are just like they're almost like a pamphlet. They're not actually quite a book. It's like they're quite when you receive them, there's not that many pages, and you can't help but feel a bit deflated. That's a lot of money for something that's so small. And it better have words of gold in this. And of course, the content's more important than the size of it. It doesn't have to be substantial to be something great, but I think it's very rare for a gem to exist that makes such short work worth it. Wouldn't want to say it's lazy, because it's not. It's incredible. Like I said, it's hard to create books, and it's harder for some than it is for others. But what I want to say is that moment when it gets hard is the moment so many people turn back, and they don't push themselves over that milestone. Each of the books I've created, I've had the same issue. You get to a certain point, you think, damn, I'm so close, but if I finish now, then it's easier, isn't it? But no, I set a goal target. Every time I write a book, I set a goal target. It doesn't have to be 100% reaching that target. Sometimes I go past, sometimes slightly below, because like I said, the content obviously is more important. You don't want to sort of expand it unnecessarily. But I think if it's considerably short, then surely there's more content that can be created to make it more substantial, something that's been missing. And I think if there's not enough content left to create something, then I think it's worth begging the question, is it worth saying? Because if you can't fill a book, then for the most part, it means you don't have enough to say on the subject, so you're not ready to release it. That's not for everybody. And it's such a thing as short stories, But if I was writing a short story, for instance, I'd write a compilation of some short stories. If I had one short story and it only reached maybe 150 pages, that I personally, I wouldn't release it, because I wouldn't feel proud in myself. I'd think I've half-assed this. If I can create 3 short stories, or even 2, if it's 2 at 150, still 300 pages, that's a good number. 2 short stories in a book, at least it gives readers value for their money. Like all my books are of substantial size. I mean, this one is Heal Your Mind to Free Your Soul, my last book. We reached like 309 pages, this one. See, 250 is around about the lowest I want to go. If it's slightly less, then I probably would be not ready to release it. I'd think, okay, what chapter am I missing? What could be added? So Losing Your Mind to Find Your Soul is 440 pages. So it's quite a substantial book. It's the biggest book I've wrote. That was in collaboration with Kristen. So stands to reason it'd be bigger, because I still set a standard for myself. And of course, when you're adding someone else's content too, it's going to be bigger, isn't it? Father's Daughter, my first book. Now, that's where I say I set a goal. It was never going to be, my first book was never going to be something short. I wouldn't have been proud. If I'd done something short, I'd have felt that I still have to make up for that, because I didn't truly do it in my mind. But again, I'm not trying to criticize other people. I'm just trying to set a standard here that I don't want to devalue the craft of writing. You know, we can produce our own work now about publishers, but I think we should still hold ourselves to a high standard and hold ourselves accountable. Because the shorter it gets, it will get to the point where people are going to do less than 100 pages, call themselves an author. I think it's worthy, but really it's just the beginnings of a book, you know, almost like an introduction. So it has to get over that point of difficulty where you can actually finish it, because that's how I see it. So A Father's Daughter, my first book, was 312 pages. 312 pages, because I mean, as a book, for me, that's considered a book. 312 pages, I'd say 250 is minimum. I think my second book, Heartbroken Daughter, that was actually close to 250. I think we reached, around about 250 pages. But that's enough. That's enough of a book. But I'm also aware that it's not as big as my other books, but it's still good enough. The content in there was a follow-up. It was something that people requested rather than I wanted to do. But yeah, the next book I expect to be in around about 300 and something. It's coming along nicely. I've done a lot of chapters so far. There's still a little bit more to finish, but that's going to release in the next few months. Like I say, I wouldn't ever release something that I'm not proud of. So if part of me is saying to myself, you know, you could have done more, you should have done more. Like I say, my point in me personally is if I can't fulfill a book, then I'm not ready to write about the subject, you know, and that's what it is. So if it was a novel or story, like I say, if it's a short story, that's absolutely fine, isn't it? But then I'd make sure I have to write 2 to make up for the fact that it's not a full story, rather than release loads of little books. But that's personal preference, you know. But I just see too many people, you know, consider themselves authors, and you go, well done. You know, you should be really proud of yourself to have achieved it. But then when I see how many pages it is, I think, you know, you've only just touched the surface. You never actually pushed yourself, although they might feel they did. I think anyone that reaches 300 pages has really pushed themselves through like a dark pit of despair, really. You get to that point where you don't even know if you're going to finish it. And it's that hurdle you get to where you've actually managed to get there. So yeah, when it's quite short, I don't think it's not so hard to reach that point. It's that extra hurdle to get over to get to that substantial work. Because another thing I noticed, there was someone else in the past that produced a book, and I thought, well done you, I'm going to check this book out. Most of the book was literally empty pages, leaving people to write their own notes and things. And I thought, that's not a book either. That's what is that? That's an exercise book. You surely can't call yourself an author based on an exercise book. You know, I found that remarkable, because I was looking, and again, I don't like to criticise other people's work, but you know, I can't help but compare to the standards people set before they consider themselves authors. And it's like, I don't want to devalue the term author, and the ability to be a writer. We've got to hold ourselves accountable. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, you know, I guess because I hold myself accountable, you can't necessarily hold people to the same standard. But I think we should be trying to preserve books, preserve the integrity of books. And just because we don't have to appease a publishing house, as independent, self-published authors, we should still, you know, hold ourselves to the same standard. Would a publishing house release these short, thin books? For the most part, I don't think they would. As I know, some of them are very strict. They expect a certain size. They expect a certain depth of content, and you know, it would just get turned away. So we need to hold ourselves to the same standard that they do. We just don't have to answer to them. We don't have to sort of like give them most of the royalties. Because nowadays, I think a lot of these publishers, they expect people to promote themselves. So it begs the question, what are they doing? You know, but yet they take most of the money. And I think that's where we take our power back and say, you know what, we can, if that's the case, I can do it myself. As I say, we've got to be holding ourselves to a higher standard than just creating our first drafts, pretty much, because that's what it seems like. If you can write half a book, then you're halfway there, aren't you? But rather than just publish it and say, you know, that's enough, take a moment to rest and then come back and finish what you started, maybe when you've got more knowledge, when you're ready to, rather than rush it out and say it has to be done now. You know, I think, you know, if people are happy to receive small works, I think that's fine too. I mean, I'm not like here to be completely critical. I just hope people don't start devaluing the craft of writing. You know, I hold it incredibly dear. And like I say, even with my first book, there was no way I was going to devalue anything. I wasn't, because I knew what it'd mean to me, and I didn't want to half-ass it. I didn't want to feel like I'm a bit of a fraud in some way. I didn't want to feel like, you know, I'm calling myself an author when I know deep in my heart that I didn't quite make it. So it was never going to be released until I knew I actually got there. I mean, I actually do a bit of research, find out what's typically a word count for a book and how many pages considered a traditional book, and with that knowledge, I set that marker. Of course, I don't hold myself 100% to it, because you don't want to sort of expand a book unnecessarily. If you've already covered everything, you're truly impressed with it, and you think that's enough for someone to really grasp the topic, then it's fine. That's fine. But like I said, I think it's very few and far between where that is the case. Of course, some people prefer short books to big books because it's just easier than to read, and I think life's got a bit busy. So there is that desire for that, I guess, at times. But yeah, I mean, when I buy a book, it's one of the first things I actually look at, to be honest. Because if I'm interested in something, I'll consider the topic. How valuable is that topic, in the sense of, is it rare that it exists? If it's rare that it exists, then I think someone can get away with less content. Is the content powerful in itself, standalone? So is it that powerful that the size of it is irrelevant? And then I think to myself, what am I actually looking to get from this? Do I want to be entertained? Do I want to, you know, what do I want? But for the most part, if I see anything less than 200 pages, I'm not even going near it, because I don't think it's finished. And I think, you know, often the people are trying to charge similar money to what other people have done when they've created twice the body of work. And like I say, some people are putting exercises in the middle of their books, which that means there's even less content in it, isn't it? Because if you've used maybe a whole page or half a page of empty space, then that's not a true reflection of the word count. If, you know, I think if someone's got a book out and it says 150 pages or something, and there's loads of workspace, they must have only done, I think, about 20,000 words. And 20,000 words is like my starting point, you know. I wouldn't even consider it started properly unless I get to 20,000. When I get to 40,000, I'm like, okay, we're really close now. We're getting somewhere. We've achieved. The most important content is there. We've got substantial body, but it's still missing something. It's missing a finale, or you haven't elaborated enough on a certain topic or a certain chapter. You know, there's more you can do, and it's up to me to find out where I've sort of breezed over something, because it might be that there's a chapter that's just too thin on the ground, and really I haven't elaborated enough, but thought you'd done enough. It's always little ways. And of course, the biggest thing is going to be editing. You have to be able to edit your work, or hire someone to do the editing. For the most part, people hire. I edit myself, just because I guess I'm a bit of a control freak in that way. I don't want someone just completely plastering my work. I'd rather take the time myself. And I think, but by doing things for yourself, you're sort of becoming stronger, more talented, more skillful. But I hold, like I say, everything I do, I hold my health self to the highest standard. I hope, you know, if I didn't think I could achieve similar to what a professional would do, then I wouldn't dream of even trying. If I think I'm just going to do it I'm just going to go over a quick draft, and that's no good. If I'm not going to put myself all into it, then someone else will have to do it for me. That's just the way that is. But, you know, I do hold myself to a higher standard. I'm aware that anything you do is going to be compared to others. And some people are going to have a massive, powerful team behind them. You know, you've got a publishing house who have editors at their whim. Really, they can just call upon them. They've got book designers who can create some incredible covers. So in some ways, I'm limited in what I can create, But as great as some of the covers are, it's the content of work that really matters. You know, you're not going to stand there staring at a cover every day, but you are going to read the book. And once that first page has been read, we forget about what the cover looks like, you know. So we have to make sure that every word has meaning, there's a purpose to it, it's there for a reason. But I think don't start writing unless you feel ready. That's something. You've got to have the idea in mind of what your content's going to be. If you're not ready to write it, then I wouldn't even dream of starting, because there's no point starting something and then coming back every few months to continue, because I think you just lose momentum for starters, and then you probably lose the integrity of the work, in the sense that it'll always be fragmented. It's got to be like a process where you're committed to it. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, I can't sit here and say how much someone should do, but I think if you want to be proud of your work, it's set a goal. And if you set a goal, then be honest with yourself about it. You know, don't set a goal and say, I'm going to do 60,000 words, because that's considered a book. And then you start writing, you find it's getting harder and harder. And then you get to 30,000 and go, I've had enough here. It's a bit like someone's doing exercises, you know, I'm getting a bit out of breath, I'm getting a bit tired now. I'm going to stop. That's enough for the day, I've done enough. I set that goal, but who cares? I've just achieved everything. It's like you didn't push yourself. Didn't push yourself over that line to create that extra work. And believe me, if you just did that, not only would the work be substantial in terms of the size of it, but the scope, people would come away with even more knowledge, because that's what it is. If you can write half a book, then you're proficient in the subject. Push yourself that extra mile and share more wisdom with someone. I'm talking non-fiction here. I think if you're doing fiction, then you have to have an idea before you start of the story you're doing, whether you're going to create the entire setting and like the universe, the surroundings, the people, and really expand upon it. Because you'd find most novels, half of it is describing, half of it is going to describe the settings. So if you take away all that, then it would be half a book. You know, it would be a short story. Because not a lot of events actually happen in books. If you actually look at it, it doesn't really expand too much. Like I say, it's mainly the settings and what they're doing and what they're wearing, how they're feeling. But you think actually the actual movement and interactions they've had, they haven't had that many. And it's the same for films. That's why film's only an hour and a half compared to a book being about 8 hours, because you can only do so much. But yeah, anyway, yeah, just it got me thinking that there's just so many books released since lately that are just a bit small. But yeah, I look in my book collection, not just my books. I'm just sharing what I'm books, because like I say, I hold myself to the same standard that a publishing house would with others. So like when I first write my first book, I couldn't help but look at the books in my book collection that I absolutely loved, and I thought, I want to be able to do something like that one day. Now, if I wrote a book and it was half the size of the book that's on my bookshelf, I wouldn't feel like I equaled someone. I wouldn't feel like I did it. Okay, I got so close, you know, and that's frustrating if you got that close and never got quite there. It's like you was already getting there, you know. That would have eaten me up. I mean, I could do it now, maybe one, if I really wanted to do one that's a little smaller, because I've already achieved the goal. I've already shown myself that I can do it multiple times. It wasn't a case of a one-trick pony. I've done 4. The 5th is going to be out in July. So in that sense, but then I think I've held myself accountable all those times. Why would I sort of cheapen out now? I can't even think of a topic where I would do a shorter book. Maybe there's one book that I could probably do that could be shorter if I wanted it to, because it would be a guide, it'd be an actual help book for someone. And I think once you've completed these steps, there's no need to elaborating. You don't have to make it more complicated than it is. I think if it's a help book in that sense, like a little series of guides, there's no need to go beyond the actual topic, is there? So that, in that sense, yeah, there's a reason for some books to be a little bit smaller. But yeah, for the most part, I think we should, like I say, we should be holding ourselves accountable. And often you say don't compare yourself to others, but I think when it comes to books, you have to. You have to compare the size to the standard. because there's a reason. There's a reason that is the standard. You know, there's a reason it is, because if it was acceptable to create something tiny, then there'll be loads of tiny books. And if there isn't, there's a reason for that. But anyway, yeah, I'm just seeing it more with the independent thing, because, like I said, publishing houses won't let people get away with that. So it is more the self-published independent troop, really, who are doing that more and more. But then they're overinflating the prices as well. They're putting the price up so high that it's like, that's ridiculous for the size of the book. You know, it's unreal. It's unreal that you not if you actually it's almost money grabbing. That's what it feels like. They're not writing for the passion of writing. They're writing to create an opportunity just to grab money off people. And I think in some cases I'm noticing, especially when I look at the reviews, is some people seem to be quite comfortable with that. They don't even care. If you can get away with it, then that's what's happening. But you know, if we look at Stephen King, for instance, for example, I know it's completely not really the right way, because most people are not going to write like Stephen King or even write what he writes. But his books are rarely thin. His books are actually huge. But I think, personally, his books are too big. He over elaborates on too much. It can get boring and fluff. So there is a balance to be had with when it comes to writing, really. But yeah, I really just wanted to get the point across that if we want to achieve our dreams and goals, you know, then we have to push ourselves hard. If we take the easy option all the time, one day we'll sit back and look and go and be a bit regretful that we didn't quite push ourselves. But I don't want to take anything away from anyone that's created anything, and they are authors, but maybe just push themselves that little bit harder on their next outing. But yeah, I mean, I'm not putting myself on a pedestal to say this is how people should be. It's just more from my point of view. If I was creating it, I wouldn't feel, I don't want to say proud, I just wouldn't feel complete. So like, if I had a book that was half the size of the ones I've wrote now, it would never be my favourite book, no matter the topic. That would be the one I'd look at and go, oh, well, that's a half. You know, so yeah, if I, like I say, if I ever wrote something that was too small, unless it's a help guide, unless it's actually a guide book, there's no way I would release it. That'd be one of those nearlies. It would be a case of that's still sitting in drafts, not even edited yet, because I wouldn't consider it finished. I don't think it's fair for people. I think if you're doing, like I say, a short story, a guide, or something to complement the books. Let's say you've wrote books and you're trying to do like an aside, something a bit more, just elaborating on a book, but it's more like a support of that book. So you're not actually writing about it, maybe you just fleshed out some characters and you wrote it a little bit. It's more like a gift to the audience, you know. That could be a bit smaller. That could be quite small, I'd guess. Because like, you've created a book, people maybe love the book, or even if they haven't read it yet, and you think, I want to just add a little bit more to this, and rather than add it to the existing book, to make it like a second edition or something, you just create a little bit extra to the side of it, you know, in their separate works. Yeah, I think that could be a cute little addition. Yeah, I mean, I hadn't thought of that before, so that's something I'm just thinking about now. It's just pretty cool that's something I don't think many people would explore. So if you loved the book that much when you wrote it, and you really loved the characters, before I could tell more of a backstory to these characters that's not quite going to make it into a whole book, you could do that in a separate book, and you just to give people a little bit extra, a bonus content you get in the TV, in the films. You could do the same for a book. That'd be pretty cool. But yeah, like I say, the reason it all started really is that sometimes I get books and I get quite disappointed when I see them, and it happens. Like I said, it's in the self-publishing industry where I am. I'm proud to be independent, proud to be able to do it myself, but it's just a few that I'm like excited to read because they hype themselves up, and I receive it and I think, whoa, this isn't quite what I was expecting. So now, like I said, I do check the page marker on like Amazon and things, because it shows you if the book, it's never 100% accurate, that for some weird reason though. So sometimes it can say there's less pages when there's slightly more. I've never seen it say there's more than there is though. So if it says 220 pages, then it's likely to be 220 or slightly more. It very rarely would, I don't think it would ever be less. But yeah, maybe 220 would be considered a okay book. I think you're really pushing the limits at that point though, on a threshold. But I think if you're less than that, it's a bit scary for me to consider it. I'd say it's half or 3/4. But it's just that little bit, I just think people need to push themselves a little harder. That's all. It's not. I don't like being critical, and I don't want to make it seem like I'm trying to be above everybody else. Certainly not the case. I just want to push people to really go to fulfill something, make them question it a little bit more and go, you know what, I haven't quite finished. I think I can add a little bit more. What am I missing? Just achieve that goal that you're really proud. Because I can't, if people are absolutely fine with their shorter books, then that's fine. But I think if you've got a little regret inside, that's going to eat you up for a long, long time. Because some people have only got one book in them, so let's make that one book great. The other thing when you write books, of course, is you have to be open to criticism because everybody has an opinion, and you've got to have thick skin because it doesn't mean you have to concern yourself with that opinion, but you can be strong enough to let it bounce off you. If you think of Harry Potter, for instance, you would say millions and millions love Harry Potter. There's still people out there that hate Harry Potter. So that means you can't make everybody happy. And when you understand you can't make everybody happy, you're just going to have to accept that criticism exists. But do not release anything if you can't cope with the criticism, because, like I said, if not everyone's going to like it, then someone isn't going to like it, are they? So you've got to be able to take the bad with the good. But it's at the end of the day, are you proud of what you created? Have you put the best into it? And then when you're finished, even if you've put all that effort in, you've got a decision to make. Do you make the book only available to you and your family because it's like an heirloom, something to keep for your ancestors, or do you release it to the wider world? And I had that problem early on when I wrote my first book. It was written for me and my daughter. Then I thought, wait a minute, a family could do reading this. Then I realised the more I was writing it, that actually I think it could help heal some people. Shine a light on life really and the issues in society and what we need to be changing. So I thought I'd share it with the wider world, and then I thought, no, I'm not going to share it with the wider world because it wasn't written for that. I don't really think it's too personal. And then I went back again, and it's too big to just leave to not tell other people. People if we want to create change, we're going to have to make ourselves uncomfortable. We're going to have to go against the grain a bit and do some things that maybe wasn't the initial intent, but now you've created something that's bigger than just sharing it amongst yourselves. And that's what it was. I'm not saying it's the best book in the world. I'm just saying it meant too much to just leave it. And then at that point you leave yourself open. What I will say is, it's my best work. Everything I write is my best work at that given time. My first book, I think, could be improved. I know how it could be improved. But I'm leaving everything untouched for a reason. It was my best work at the time. I didn't half-ass anything. It's only now because I'm better, more skillful, that I know where I can adapt and change it. But I want to leave it as it is because I want to show people where your starting point can be, point of reference, and then how you can improve. And as you grow, you perfect the craft, you write better, you're more proficient, so I write faster. And then because you go over a hurdle, it's a bit like what I said at the beginning, if it gets difficult and complicated, when you get over that hurdle, it's a huge achievement. But what that also sets a precedent, because now you know when it gets tough, you know what comes next. You know how to get over it. And you know how to complete what you started. And that's why I can do what I do now. It's like the first one was the marker, it set the standard. And then from there on, I've got to match that. Otherwise, it's not on par, because everything I create has to be better than the previous. Otherwise, what we're doing. Doesn't mean my opinion of this is better is going to be the same as everybody else. Someone else might read the first book and say that's their favourite, But for me, if there's no point to the content, there's no point me even finishing it and writing and publishing it, So I have to at the end analyse everything I've wrote and say, is it justifiable to release this? Is there actually a need for it, or have you just wasted your time? But of course, you figure that out as you write in anyway. You don't just wait to the end to figure that one out. But yeah, there's many questions in your own mind of what is a book? Why are you writing the book? How do you want to share your voice? It's so much that goes into it, but it's actually, I find it remarkable and I absolutely love it. And it's that pushing myself to the point of my potential and probably past what I should be able to achieve is what excites me and intrigues me. So I can be proud of everything I create because I know I push myself to my limit in each of them. Literally, where I say about pushing yourself to the point, the new book is actually, it could be twice as big. I had like 20 something chapters in mind. I've started working towards them. And in the end, every time I'm doing it, I'm getting new ideas. Now it's expanded to like 50 chapters. So now I've had to take chapters out of it because I don't want it that big. And then it's like, that will either become another book in the future, or I'll just leave those chapters out and never get around to completing them because I don't have to write everything that I've got on my mind. But there's certainly another body of work there. So where I'm going to release my 5th book in July, I have another book that I've already started writing for next year, but I stopped writing it because I really wanted to get this one done. And then after that, I actually have another book in mind that I could do if I choose to, but I was actually going to take a break, and I probably will take a break. So whether I get around to it, it may be 2 books in a year because it's near, because it could be done, or not. But yeah, we can always expand, and I think we should give the audience the best of us, because that's what it is. We're telling a story, we're telling a narrative, and I think the audience, the reader, deserves to get the best of us. And that means put the effort in, doesn't it? Go above and beyond to the point where they're satisfied and you're excited and you're thrilled. But yeah, just not start making it too cheap, because it's a bit like CDs. Again, it's sometimes the quality of the work outweighs the size of it. But like even recently, I've been getting CDs, which I think the issue is vinyl. I think vinyl's come back, and I think you're limited on how many tracks fit on a vinyl. But then that's also mirrored on CDs now. On a CD, I think you can actually reach about, I think, 22 tracks. So you can have 22 songs on a CD. The size of a CD can actually fit that on. But some albums lately have only got maybe 8 or 10 songs. And I would say 12 is the minimum that I think is acceptable for an album. I think 12 is a good number. If you go beyond that, it's a nice bonus, and I think you appreciate it. But when you see an album that's got like 8 songs, I think, what is this? It's a set of singles here. This is not good enough, because it's like you get through 8 songs really quick when you're listening to them, and it's, you wouldn't say music albums are considerably cheap or anything. And again, I'm in the same boat of that. If you've only got 8 songs, don't release it until you've got your 12. Set a standard. That irritates me. It bothers me, even if it's my favourite singer. And I'm thinking, oh yeah, I can't wait to get this set. And I see the list. I'm like, what the hell is this? You're not finished. Okay, you're writing. Maybe writing songs is really hard, and it's going to take you a while. Take a few more months to get this thing finished. I hate half-assing things. Yeah, I think we've got to respect the audience more, because I could literally create a load of books at 150 pages. Maybe I've got myself 10 books all of a sudden instead of 5. And each one I'll list at the similar price, and look at all the royalties you get. You double the income. But I don't do it for the money. I set certain prices because I have to, because of the print costs, and it's just the way it works out. I can't do it any less. So sometimes I'm not happy sometimes with the pricing, but it's out of my control, that side of things. I think some people are just too focused on the financial. They want to just milk everything they can get. So keep making small so they've got more. But I think if you're going to do that, you should be pricing it appropriately. I mean, pricing something for like £10, for instance, that's half a book, I think is quite disturbing. That doesn't sit right with me. It doesn't sit right with me at all. But anyway, that's my 2 cents on the topic of writing and publishing. If we're going to start going in the independent route like I have done, then we have to set a higher standard than we've been doing. Otherwise, it's back to the publishing houses, I think, because if they're the only ones that are going to set a decent standard, then that's where it's all going to head towards, isn't it? But I think if we devalue it that much, that's the way it's going to go. People just won't trust independent self-publishing anymore. Yeah. So if we set a high standard, then we can actually make it the normal, where we have control and power of our own work, and we receive what's worth, you know, rather than someone else receive it all. But we've got to be matching it. We've got to have high quality. But yeah.